Listen, this movie's based on an actual lie. And it's a high combo price. I was able to catch it back at Sundance and have been praising it multiple times. It's this crazy story about a dying grandma whose entire family plans a fake wedding in order to come back to China to see her. But the thing is, no one's told her she's dying, and they intend on keeping that lie a secret. Let me explain. So this may actually sound familiar since the director Lulu Wang had actually told her story on the podcast This American Life. She opens up about how she had this strong relationship with her grandma before being moved to America at age 6. Years later, her nine-eye gets diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and is given 3 to 4 months to live. The family chooses to keep it alive the same way they've done for previous members and fake a wedding in order for all of them to see her one last time. So you know what? A comedy by default. That podcast then caused a lot of interest from producers wanting to turn it into a movie.
The producers came, I had people offering like much bigger budgets for the film because they heard it on This American Life and it was now IP. And I said no. I said no to the Disney version. I said no to the big budget version that was going to be the big fat Chinese wedding version where she's the bride and she brings home her boyfriend that they broke up but they're gonna get married anyway. That was the version people were pitching me, and I was like, but did you even hear my story?
I love how she just told Disney,
like, are you totally cool on not hearing from them, or should they keep your number just in case?
You know what? I'm good.
It's interesting because while it is based on her experience, the character of Billy, played by Awkwafina, isn't really meant to be her. It's just supposed to be someone who's going through something very, very, very similar. That way she has the emotion of a sort of biopic, but it isn't restricted. And it turns out that a lot of people have gone through this.
And at first it was like, I sort of expected that there would be other Chinese people and other Asian people, but there were people that were like Middle Eastern or from like South America that were doing it, and that's what was really surprising was just how widespread this practice is.
I know the Swedes in Midsommar took their elderly to another extreme, but it's fascinating hearing this lie be normal to a lot of people, considering that for most of us Mexicans, we keep our grandparents till they're like 110.
And when they are sick, they never go to the doctor. Man, I feel bad. I should go to the doctor. Shit, you better not go. They're gonna find something wrong with you. Don't go.
But as weird as it is if you're American, it's interesting to see that it's not done out of ill intentions. Like, even the doctors are in on it.
Well, as told by a Chinese person, that Americans think on in an individualist way, and in China there's more of a group mentality. So we take on that emotional burden for someone who is sick.
And so the obstacle was making a movie that stayed true to that story. If you've seen the movie, you would get why so many producers freaked out with it and wanted to label it, put it in a box since they didn't know what genre it was. And I love how Lulu's response to that was just, well, what genre is your life? She had already made a feature about an artist whose work takes off after his death. Only thing being, he wasn't dead. But the closest to this movie, I would say, and one of my favorites of her, is her short Touch that really started honing in on these cultural differences. At first, they wanted her to change the ethnicities of the characters. There's this quote from producers wanting her to alter events to the story of her life. That never happened in her life. I was even amused by the amount of mayonnaise suggestions, like scenes walking down a park. Like, what is this, Garden of Thrones again? It's ironic that in a story based on a lie, they wanted to strip all the emotion around it by lying. So when it came to deciding whether it was an American production or a Chinese one, man, they practically malfunctioned.
People kept trying to put me in a box and saying, if it's an American film, it's got to look like this, and people can't be speaking in a different language, and we can't have subtitles. But, I went to Chinese investors, too, and they said if it's a Chinese film, it can't be told through the perspective of Billy, because her point of view is too Americanized. And so it was very confrontational and like, well, where is there room for me then as a filmmaker in this country, in this industry?
Spoiler alert. There is. She pulled a Roma, which, for those who don't know, my Tío Corón literally rebuilt his childhood home. He got all the furniture, all of that. And here Lulu was able to shoot the movie in China, at her grandmother's town, because she wanted to capture the peach building she knew growing up. The production had people moving cars. She got it into Sundance with rave reviews, and was even able to cast her own aunt to be in the movie, the real-life sister to her grandma who started the lie.
Yeah, my parents saw it at Sundance.
What did they think?
Well, my dad said, it's pretty good, to like the entire audience, which is an Asian A+.
So here's why it's a combo price for me. I love the subtlety to it because the movie doesn't stop to explain cultural differences to other people who in the movie are also Chinese. If Disney had their way, they probably would have had it as Awkwafina having an American boyfriend who gets to be our gateway and everyone overly explains everything to him. And then at the end, he probably helps her understand her culture better. Nah. Instead, there are points in the movie where they don't even use subtitles because she knows you get the emotion. She respected the audience enough to show us a game where we may not know the rules to it, but we know he's losing. And then there are other parts where I related to it fully, even if I've never been in that exact situation. Listen, if your family doesn't wake up planning dinner before you've even had breakfast, then I don't know you people. We're all used to certain foods and sometimes we don't even want to explore outside our circle, but even within your own family, I'm sure we've all been in that scenario where you're looking forward to like a family dinner. You finally get there for those empanadas and the moment you go for one, everyone criticizes your weight because you took one too many. But then if you don't eat enough, you're considered too sick.
How many wontons you want?
5.
5? That's not enough.
Make a dozen then.
10's good.
Parents really be like that. I love how a lot of the movie revolves around food, not just because, that's a part of life, but because food is a love language between families, as they put it. But what's crazy is that the entire family isn't really hungry since they're mourning, but they can't show that, and they can't stop eating since they have to keep up with the lie. On top of that, Nana saw like the wedding planner before everyone came, so she's taking this fake wedding too literally. She's doing Tai Bo like my grandma did back in the day, releasing those toxins. Everyone's trying so hard not to break, and meanwhile the grandma's like, do I gotta do everything myself? One of the biggest moments for me comes in the dinner scene, and I don't know how much of this is considered a spoiler, so I'm just gonna put a warning here. Go watch the farewell as soon as you can. But the thing is, I was already spoiled the scene because I've lived in it. It's funny to me how Lulu was given notes about how the mom was too mean, completely ignoring the perspective of her scenario with the mother-in-law. I could feel the people in the theater who thought this was a fight, while to me, they were just working things out with their inside voices. Y'all don't want to hear the outside ones. And then comes the big Western versus Eastern clash, which for me would be over the border. And this discussion about how some consider themselves more Chinese, while the other side of the table proudly call themselves American. And it's something that if they ever tried to remake this movie, like America likes to do, they're gonna completely butcher this aspect. Especially when it comes to seeing kids as investments. Now, I'm not talking about Friday Night Lights trying to live vicariously through your son because you couldn't make it. I'm talking about leaving your home country because you wanted the best for your child, even when nobody else sees it, including them. It doesn't mean you don't like your home, even though that's what people back home are always going to hit you with. It means you're now stuck between two worlds. And that's the catalyst for my favorite scene in the movie, easily. And that's when Billy confronts her mom and tells her how she feels, finally expressing how much the move hurt her. That said, why is it that every time we have a deep discussion, it's never in private? Y'all noticed we never get to express ourselves without stuttering? There's never a John Williams score playing in the background with the rain. Nah, there's always a random cousin or family member awkwardly listening in when you're finally pouring your heart out.
Could you just fuck off?
Oh, absolutely not.
No, I'm saying what.
Knowing that Awkwafina was also raised by her grandmother, though, boosts this scene a little bit.
The affectionately nicknamed Grandma Fina has made cameos in music videos, fully supporting her granddaughter's edgy brand of humor.
She's a funny woman.
Man, no joke was ever too dirty for her.
But hearing about Lulu's backstory makes it even more intense, because she didn't move to New York City, which has a Chinatown right when you get off the bridge. Nah, she moved from China to Miami at age 6. So knowing that makes Billy's confession to her mother about feeling lonely and lost feel 10 times more powerful than it already is. That's why there's a physicality to it when Billy finally embraces a lie that she's been against, running to go snatch the grandma's test results and alter them at the local Kinko's. Remember how at the dinner party they talked about kids being investments? Well, they bring up the piano, which Lulu herself did play before dropping it to become a filmmaker. But she's credited as a pianist for one of the final songs in the movie. If you listen to the podcast, this quote really shines through about not knowing whether the lie was right or wrong, because obviously there's a lot of people who are going to see this movie and think that, hey, what they're doing is completely wrong. And there's going to be others who have no problem putting their elderly with strangers who are caring for them. And that's where this bird comes in.
I think to me it represents perspective. Like, so many weird coincidences happen all around us all the time if you look for them. And certainly for me, and some of them like are hard to explain because you're like, there's a bird, but I just saw the bird. You know, people would look at you crazy, but like, that's strange. It's like the same bird. But I think it sort of represents the fact that if you read into it, if you take meaning from it, then it's meaningful. If you see no meaning in it, you're just like, it's another bird, then there's no meaning. And that's sort of what the whole movie is about. It's sort of perspective and belief. And if you believe something works, then maybe it does.
To wrap up my appreciation for this movie, I want to read a conversation between her and her mom after all the Sundance deals were flooding in, with A24s clocking it at 6 mil, but also having streaming deals that were bigger. Lulu says she used to compare me to other kids as Asian parents do, and she would say, you know, David promised his mom that when he grows up, he's going to buy her a house. Never got that promise from you, right? I know she was joking, but it made me feel bad because I knew I wanted to do something with my life that I was passionate about, and the struggle with that was that it felt selfish. It felt like I'm choosing myself over the ability to take care of my family. So when she found herself at Sundance, having to pick between a studio that would pay her less but encouraged her vision, or an altered version that meant more green, she asked her mom for advice. I can buy you a house now, and you can tell all your friends, she remembers telling her. And the mom went, why would you buy me a freaking house? I already have one. This film is your baby, and you have to give it to the place that is not necessarily the wealthiest, but will give it the most love and joy and bring it into the world in the right way. And I think they both made the right decision. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts about The Farewell. If you haven't seen it, again, you guys know what I do in this channel. I always try to pitch it to you guys if I think it's a good movie. And even if you got it spoiled, good movies can't get spoiled. Like, obviously you want to go into them fresh, but go into this movie not knowing anything if you can. I mean, if you got to this point, you know some bits of it, but it's an emotional experience. I think it's even better on more rewatches, especially the more nuances that you pick up on it. But I'm curious to know your thoughts if you were able to check out this movie. Some of the other quotes that I had here I thought were pretty funny. One of my favorite scenes was the juxtaposition at the cemetery. We all know the dramatic lady who cries at funerals. Like, you know, you can't say anything because obviously they're in mourning. But it's also like, you ain't gotta yell that much. I also love the scene in there where they let the man smoke because he was already dead. One of my favorite quotes while researching this was, life's not what you do, but how you do it. Another tidbit, she was fired from Pineapple Express. I think that's beautiful because imagine if she was still working, like I think she was like a PA or something, but imagine if she continued down that line and never ended up making this movie, which is one of my favorites of the year. It's always interesting to see where a bunch of filmmakers start up on, but I think one of the final things I wanted to cover was actually a scene that she talks about, and I'll actually let her explain it dealing with the ending.
Because the story for me was never about whether she lives or dies. Like, that's the Hollywood version, right, of like, oh, and then she has a wedding and now she can attend. You know, her doing that exercise on the streets of New York and having her voice transcend, you know, an echo into China was sort of my way of representing the fact that she carries her grandmother's spirit with her no matter where she goes, and that her voice through art in her life, it carries and resonates and it you know, contains the voice of her grandmother, and is heard globally, even in China.
That said, I think in the podcast she said the grandma might have still been alive, and I believe she is, so I don't know how they're gonna handle the movie once they go over there, and if she sees it, there goes the lie. But I think, you know, there was a cute part in the podcast where they kind of talked about, well, what if the grandmother knew the entire time? That would be a really interesting play. But let me know if you liked it or if you didn't, or other ones that you recommend down below in the comment section. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and you can have the 12 wontons.
10's good.